Salutations, my fiendish film fanatics. I'm the Silver Screen Slasher, and welcome to Picture House of Horror 2, Electric Sequel Boogaloo.
And I'm the Cinema Stein. And yes, I am joining Silver Screen Slasher for another one of our reviews.
So, what's today's review? All I can say for this one is pack your boomsticks and get ready to kiss your nubs goodbye, because we're diving into Evil Dead 2, released ironically on Friday, March 13th, 1987.
Yep, Evil Dead 2 is a sequel to the successful 1981 horror classic Evil Dead, directed, of course, by at the time low budgeted at least movie making director Sam Raimi.
This film, Evil Dead 2, holds a special place to my heart. It's not only one of my favorite and my all-time favorite horror movie, but it's one of my all-time favorite films in general, mainly because of how insane it is. The film, and keep in mind though, this came out after a 6-year gap from the first Evil Dead movie, and right after, not to mention all the obscenity charges as Raimi had to deal with from the first movie. After, so, the film was released by Renaissance Pictures as a subdivision of Dino De Laurentiis Pictures. And honestly, I feel like if it just is delayed inevitable anymore, I'm gonna go bouncing all over the wall. So let's just dive into the movie. Now, now as the movie opens, the first thing that should be taken aware of is the fact that this film is technically a remake of the original Evil Dead, seeing as when they were filming this movie, they never were able to get the rights to use any footage from the first film. So, in the first 8 minutes, it's a short remake of the original.
Yeah, but don't worry, folks. When you do watch this film possibly for yourself one day, like we said, it's a kind of remake, not entirely. The rest of the film, it's a new part of the story. But on that, it basically is a bit of a retelling as well.
As the so as the movie actually opens, we are reintroduced to the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, roughly translated to the Book of the Dead. It, it the narrator goes on to detail how the book was made, how it was wrapped in human flesh and inked in human blood, as well as bringing up an important plot point that in the year 1300 AD, the book disappeared. And with that, we get reintroduced to our favorite idiot, Ash Campbell, played once again by probably my favorite funny actor, Bruce Campbell.
And his girlfriend, Linda. Now, you may be wondering, though, just real quickly, a different actress this time around actually takes on Linda and not the one from the original. And if I'm right, at least it's what I heard, and I could be wrong, but anyway, I think I heard at the time the reason as well why they didn't bring her back for the sequel is because she was actually expecting to have a child at the time, so that's why.
Yeah, pretty much. And and to be honest, I think that was for the best because
Uh, I'm just saying, but they probably didn't want to show a pregnant woman possibly getting, decapitated or whatever. That would be just too messed up.
mm-hmm. Plus, as shown in Ash vs. Evil Dead, it is proven that Ash doesn't have the best of memory. So, as a short little recap goes on, we are reintroduced to the iconic cabin, as well as the second iteration of the Book of the Dead.
And also a tape recorder.
Mm-hmm. Which is basically a voice recording of Professor Nobi, who discovered about the book and the dagger, which was basically from a
An
ancient.
old temple, I believe.
Mm-hmm, from the fictional from, if I'm not entirely sure, the fictional state of Kandar.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it, when when Nobi's voice is reading from the Book of the Dead is heard on the recorder, it once again awakens the evil spirit in the forest, which kidnaps Linda, and faster than you can blink, she is turned into a deadite.
And unfortunately, as soon as Linda turns into a deadite, let's just say Ash has to go off with her head. And unfortunately, for the rest of the film, Ash is now once again, well, up against the deadites themselves.
uh, uh, but keep in mind, this was only the first 8 minutes. The rest of the film from here is all original. Starting with that evil spirit from the end of the last film. Originally, it just crashed into Ash's face, but this time we actually see what happens as it rams into him and causing him to fly into the forest, slam into a tree, and crash into a puddle.
I'll be right back.
It's at this point we also figure out that spirit has possessed Ash, and he has now himself become a Deadite. Which, at this point, you're thinking, what? Are you kidding me? However, that's pretty much it's entirely remedied by the sun showing up and driving the spirit away. And even though Ash isn't the brightest bulb in the box, he's still smart enough to know when to get the hell out of Dodge. So he climbs into the classic Delta 88 and tries to drive away from the cabin. Unfortunately, as previously shown in the first movie, the evil spirits have dug up the bridge, which doesn't settle well with Ash at all, and he is forced to drive back into the cabin and away from the evil spirits. It's at this point that we are given possibly one of my favorite shots in the entire movie, as Ash is chased throughout the entire cabin by the evil spirit. Its first person point of view, which is basically the camera guy just following Bruce Campbell all throughout of the cabin and going through all these little tiny spaces in between the walls, which I have to admit, I have to give major props as to whoever was operating that camera at the time. They were a freaking legend. Eventually, the evil spirit loses track of Ash and backpedals back into the woods. But eventually we discover that Ash hid in the fruit cellar. Smart thinking. However, the more time that Ash stays at the cabin, the more things start to go wrong for him. As shown by Linda's corpse rising up from the ground that she was buried in earlier. And I will admit, seeing that 2D stop motion corpse of Linda just spinning around and dancing like that still gives me the heebie-jeebies. After a few more minutes of playing fucking around with Ash, eventually the head of Linda, still possessed by the Deadite, bites him and he drags it into the workshed, where he manages to get it off, where he manages to stop the Deadite from giving him head by gripping it in a vice. And eventually, after a bit more fucking around with Ash's head, he cuts up Deadite Linda's head with a chainsaw. Fortunately,
well, hold on. Let's Basically, the plot is
You missed a bit, man.
I know, but you see, there's anyway a lot to explain, so we should move on and let's just say.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I've been making sure to get through as quick as possible.
Yep. But anyway, basically, Ash is put up against, of course, Deadites Linda for a while, and up against other Deadites, pretty much throughout the rest of the film, because different ones pop up, of course, every now and then. So now, after a while of fucking around with Ash, next we are introduced to Professor Noby's daughter, played by, Annie, played by Sarah
Berry.
That's right. Who is also returning returning home to see her parents at the cabin and give her father these new pages.
Missing pages from the book.
Yeah, from the book that she found. But on her way there, let's just say she's going through a bit of road trouble because she discovers that the bridge is destroyed, and it's at this moment she meets road worker Jake, played by Dan
Hicks.
Dan Hicks, that's right.
And his girlfriend Bobby Joe, played by
and his girlfriend or wife Bobby Joe,
played by Cassie Wesley.
Yep. And then, of course, after a while, they pretty much meet up with Ash, and that's how pretty much the main movie kicks in.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Oh, uh, Stein, you forgot about one other character, Annie's boyfriend Ed, played by Richard Domier.
oh yeah. Anyway, next thing I want to get to is now the effects. First off, the effects in this film are great in a way because first off, I feel like they experiment with a few new ones now in this one. Like, of course, puppets, a bit of stop motion animation.
Hmm.
That's what I like as well. That they incorporate some new material, at least for their part of it, for this franchise, and that's what I
Hmm.
like.
The makeup
Experiment
effects in
with more
yeah.
things, and also last is the different kind of colored blood. Yes, unlike the original, where it's just good old classic red. Yes, there is still good old classic red blood in this, but there's also um
Black
green blood as
bile,
well.
green ooze.
Somewhere, and also even black blood, as Silver just mentioned before, and I like that because it kind of gives it its own unique style of color.
And there is a reason and why and there's different kinds of blood in this movie. It's mainly because, as when this film was being made, Raimi was trying to make sure that it wasn't given the dread X rating. Unfortunately, though, those fucks at the MPAA, it just never learned and just released this movie unrated.
Oh, well, that's ridiculous then. Yeah. Anyway, so I like how they also experiment with different effects. Next is about the film. By the way, I just want to quickly let people know as well is that it is actually a black comedy this time around. So it's a bit of a mixture. It's not just it's still not, of course, good old, dark, but it's also a bit funny too at times, or a bit crazy and wacky, and that's what I like about it.
I
For
always
example, one of the
classified it as
few
more of a.
and the only parts
I
of
always
this
classified it
film
as
that
a
make it
splatter horror
funny though
comedy.
is, of course, the good old badass slash goofball Ash Williams himself, and even the Deadites, which I like because I feel like even in this film they kind of give them a bit more of a sense of humor, and that's what I like. And
Hmm.
sometimes even their own like unique set of like I guess looking styles,
Hmm.
which is really great. Like for example, the scene where Ash is being possessed and uncontrollably making himself um drop glass plates onto his head, and just the physical pain that he goes through, but yet how far he goes into that part of the film. Like, I just love that. He really does look like he's putting a lot of effort into it, and I love that.
And fun fact, that was actually Bruce Campbell doing all of his own stunts. Because the man, and it's just, it's a goddamn legend when it comes to physical humor.
Oh, yeah. Also, another thing, still, like I said before, the Deadites are at times kind of funny in this too. Like, there's one scene where Ash, I believe, out of nowhere, is just being laughed at a bunch of Deadites, like, through different objects around the house, like books, you name it, shelves, of course, the deer head on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And as that scene was happening, I'm not gonna lie, even as Ash and the furniture was starting to laugh, even I kind of giggled a bit. I'm not kidding. I just found that scene even just kind of funny myself.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where the movie just makes you become part of its madness. And
Yeah.
it should be mentioned. Yeah, there are a few scenes I do feel like we should not skip out on. For example, Ash's hand becoming possessed and him having to cut it off, as well as there's a few misunderstandings between Ash and the newcomers, and of course the introduction of the main villain of this
Oh
movie,
yes, and probably the most iconic and best Deadites, probably Deadites actually even in the franchise in general.
the
Professor
Deadite of
Noby's
Annie's
wife,
dead mother,
aka the evil Henrietta.
who, fun fact, was actually played by Sam Raimi's younger brother Ted.
I was about to say that too. He was actually played by Ted Raimi, but she was actually played by Ted Raimi. But yeah, still like Henrietta. Oh my gosh, she is so scary and frightening as hell.
She is by far one. Henrietta is by far one of the most intimidating yet hilarious villains I've ever seen in a
Yeah.
horror movie in
Oh, I
quite a
almost
while.
forgot, but probably the most iconic and famous line, not just from her, but two of the Deadites in the film. Dead
Is
by dawn! Dead by dawn!
which actually on occasion is the subtitle for this movie.
Yeah.
Of course, this film also gave birth to one of the greatest versions of a horror movie character I've ever seen, as both Ash and Annie head to the work shed and and, fa- and fashion the iconic chainsaw hand, which became a staple for Ash Williams and some future Evil Dead projects.
Yep. Yeah, and by the way, this is the film where they do introduce Ash's famous and iconic chainsaw hand. And also the film where he says that great line, which I'm not going to say because I want you all to experience it for yourself. All I can say is,
It's rather groovy.
yeah. But yeah, still, what I also like is that in this film, I feel like at times they really are good at capturing very slow and quiet moments without barely any music. Like,
Mm.
they want you to be surprised, and they do a good job of that. Like, they pretty much give you that feeling where you know something isn't there, but you just don't know where it is. And it's just somewhere hiding and lurking in the shadows or whatever.
Mm.
And and that's really well done because they actually do a good job, especially near the first few minutes of the film. There is a lot of very surprising and scary moments.
Now, now, for anyone who doesn't want this to be spoiled, please, I recommend turning off the video and go watching the movie because I'm about to spoil the ending.
Yeah, also, a quick thing though that I want to mention before you actually mention the ending. One more fact, at least that I have for now, is in the tool shed. By the way, if you look on the top of the entrance of the tool shed, you actually see a rather familiar-looking type of signature weapon. Freddy Krueger's clawed glove. Yep, if you guys didn't know that, I'm not kidding. If you look literally on the top, you will see a part of it, or at least quite a bit of it.
And there is actually a reason and why Freddy Krueger's his glove is actually seen in multiple times throughout the movie. This was actually a cheeky little callback to when in Wes Craven's when back in Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy was watching The Evil Dead on her TV, which in itself was also a bit of a jab as a sort of homage to when Wes Craven had a Hills Have Eyes poster in the original Evil Dead. You can see that there is a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor here in the Evil Dead films. Anyway, here's the ending of this film. So basically, eventually, they managed to get the missing pages from the Book of the Dead, which do hint at a third film, as well as a Hero from the Sky. And eventually, after all the Deadites are defeated, they give an embodiment to the evil spirit in the woods. And after all is said and done, Annie's dead, the evil spirit's defeated, and the time portal that they used to trap the evil spirit, they didn't close it properly. And so, Ash is sucked through the time portal and crash lands in the year 1300 AD, where after killing a, to be fair, not so good looking Deadite puppet, all the knights around him basically hail him as he who has come from the sky to deliver them from the Deadites, with a cameo from director Sam Raimi. And so the movie ends with the Knights of Old Ages hailing Ash Williams as he cries out in pain.
Where he pretty much cries out, "No! No!"
No! And that was the Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. And what the hell is ready to say? This is a great movie.
Yep. My quick and final thoughts on it. It does a great job of establishing great atmosphere and jump scares. Experiments with new film techniques, at least for this franchise, and even experiments with different colors, at least colors, of course, of blood. Does a great job of building its own unique sense of humor, and also really good at fucking with your mind. And just in general, I'm glad we even get to know actually a bit more about Professor Noby and his family, because in this film, I especially not just Ash, but I feel like even they also, in a way, become a bit of a character of the film, like just the family in general, because it's almost like another very, like big key part of the story, and that's what I love about. Like in the first film, he was just kind of there in the background, just to I guess really get people hyped or whatever, or in a way a bit scared of what was going to happen, at least what was going to happen next in the original film. But here he becomes a really key part of the story here, and that's what I like. And they also go a bit more further into the Book of the Dead itself, and that's what I like. They establish a bit more about its power and what it contains. So that's why I love all these things I pretty much said. That's why I like Evil Dead 2 so much as well. Why I think it's a terrific sequel. And just in general, Ash becomes more of a badass, and Bruce Campbell's great at physical humor and just making himself look complete badass and know that how badass he is. So this film, I'm gonna give possibly a 9 out of 10. Evil Dead 2, great sequel.
It. eh, I'm gonna be honest. It's hard for me to say anything negative about Evil Dead 2 aside from that one effect, I think I mentioned earlier. But the positives outweigh and destroy any negatives this movie had. I mean, you gotta admit, this film is by far one of the greatest things to ever come out of the guy who directed the Spider-Man movies. And I will admit, this movie has had an impact on not just my heart, but plenty of other people who have seen this film too. I don't know what else to say, but I'm gonna give Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn a 10 out of 10. It's that good for me.
Anyway,
Next time we'll be going a little bit darker in terms of 80s horror, as as we take on another film that came out in 1987 that decided to tear our souls apart.
yep, where and next time we're gonna unleash hell itself. Until then, we'll see you later and have a great Halloween. And remember as well, Dead by Dawn, Dead by Dawn.
Hail.